Forget to do that until about halfway through. All right, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jessica Fisher. I'm the Crosby Scholars High School Program Coordinator. I work with all students in grades 9 and 10. We're really excited to have you today for the self-care and self-compassion parent session that we're going to be hosting with the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Psychological Services Office. Just a couple things that I want to mention before we get started. As a quick reminder, community service, the deadline for 9th and 10th graders has passed. We have extended that for our students that do still need to submit that community service. So if you have not submitted community service, please feel free to do so by May the 21st. As long as you submit those hours by the 21st, you will still be eligible to complete the program and receive your certificate for the end of the year. All right, and finally, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our psychologist from the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School Psychological Services Office. Again, they're going to be giving us a great presentation today about how we can manage stress. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat box. There will be an opportunity at the end of today's presentation to get your questions answered. And if you have any Crosby-related questions, feel free to message me as well. We'll make sure to get those questions answered as well. All right, thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Meredith. We wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about self-compassion, self-care, how we manage stress. We know that having high schoolers is difficult, that you guys are facing a lot of challenges, and then you add COVID on top of that. We know that this past year has been really difficult, so we just wanted to give you a couple practical strategies that you guys can use at home, and these things are even practical and applicable for your students and for your children as well.
Hey guys, I'm Hawa Chaudhary. I am also a school psychologist, and I'm not going to reiterate or completely agree with what Meredith just said. So welcome. We're very excited to be talking with you all today, and hopefully we can leave you all with some little tidbits and helpful things that will be useful for you all. So thank you for joining us.
Hi everyone. My name is Natalie Phillips, and I again want to welcome you all. Thank you for participating today. Hoping that we can again share some information that you all will find helpful.
And I think we did want to add that we are also parents ourselves. So I know Natalie and I both have teenagers, and Meredith has a toddler who, toddlers are known to be acting like teenagers sometimes. So so we certainly relate, and we're coming from an area of personal knowledge and experience.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. So the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services defines stress as an elevation in a person's state of arousal or readiness caused by some stimulus or demand. So there are various types of stressors. We can have what we call good stressors, which is just when we're not faced with lots of stress, positive experiences. Basically, stress can be helpful when we're able to manage it. It can help sometimes mobilize us to get certain responsibilities done. The problem, of course, comes in is when we are faced with too much stress, or when we are struggling managing our stress. And that's when we can struggle with things including our immune systems being weakened, fatigue, anxiety, depression, and exhaustion. So I want you guys to just take a brief moment to take a look at this cartoon between the heart and the brain. So hopefully you've had a chance to read that cartoon. And basically this is just kind of a funny way of saying that the stress response really all begins in our brains. So early in history, the stress response evolved as a way for human beings to survive threats. So, for example, animal attacks. So we don't face the same kind of stressors as we did then. However, we do still face challenging situations in our daily lives that can set off this stress response. So the first phase in the stress reaction or stress response cycle is a triggering event. So basically, the first phase, we're faced with some sort of a trigger. And that trigger can vary. It's very important for us as individuals to be aware of what our personal triggers are because it does differ from person to person. But generally, most of the times when we face a trigger, it's either related to if we're faced with something new, something we haven't been exposed to before, or if we're faced with something that's unpredictable or we feel like we're in a state of uncertainty, that can be a trigger. If we feel that there's some sort of a threat to our feelings of competence or our feelings of self-worth, that can definitely be a trigger as well. If we feel like we have lost a sense of control. And then of course, there are predictable events that can be a trigger as well. So there's many sources of adult stress. I mean, this list of course is not exhaustive, but just some of the common sources of adult stress can be of course our work and finances, our health or the health of our loved ones. Parenting, obviously, again, as Hawa said, we're all parents as well. And we know that we love our children, we want the best for them, but being a parent can be stressful as well. If we've experienced loss or trauma, if we're in dangerous situations, if we've experienced chronic microaggressions, prejudice, racism, politics can be stressful. And there can be positive experiences that can be stressful as well. So for example, if we're moving or if we're going on a vacation, I know some of you might be experiencing the stress of having a high schooler applying for college, right? That's a very stressful time. And I mean, Crosby Scholars is a wonderful support in helping students and families navigate that. But still, as a parent, that can be a stressful experience. So after that, we're faced with that trigger. What happens next is called an internal appraisal. And basically what happens is our senses send a signal to an area of our brains called the amygdala. The amygdala is a part of our brain that warns us of some sort of an impending danger. So the amygdala can be looked at sort of as the brain's smoke detector. The amygdala then sends a signal to our hypothalamus, which can be looked at as the brain's command center because it communicates with the body through our autonomic nervous system. So our autonomic nervous system is made up of our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is kind of like a gas pedal. So when that stress response occurs, certain hormones are released, specifically adrenaline and cortisol, and it alerts our body and puts us in what's called a fight or flight response. The parasympathetic nervous system becomes suppressed. It's kind of like our rest and digest response. It can be looked at somewhat as a break. And chronic stress can push these systems out of balance. So phases 1 through 3 of the stress reaction cycle often is pretty much outside of our awareness or control. So we don't really even know when that's happening. But however, when we get to the 4th phase of the cycle, which is the internalization phase, that's when we start to become more aware of what's happening. So that's when we might feel our hearts racing, we might feel our stomachs churning, we might get tense in our muscles, or we might start having those worried and anxious thoughts. And then the last phase of the cycle is the coping phase. And this phase is a really, really important phase. It's really a key phase because the way that we respond can determine how our default response will be. So before we move from this section, I want you guys to just take a quick moment. We're going to do a few activities today, very brief activities today. And we definitely encourage you to participate, but please, do what feels comfortable for you. So wherever you are, I just want you to take a moment to put one hand on your chest and one on your belly. Okay, and just breathe normally for a few seconds. Now, which hand rises, or which hand rises more? So if it's the hand on your chest, you might have developed something that's called a habit of shallow breathing. And shallow breathing is basically when we have a habit of breathing in too quickly. And that habit of shallow breathing can really lower our immune systems. Now, the good thing is that we can actually reverse that habit of shallow breathing if we practice a daily belly breathing practice. So just for as little as 5 minutes a day, if we practice that, it can definitely help to reverse those effects of shallow breathing if we've developed that habit. So let's just practice that really briefly. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to read for you first before we practice. We're going to inhale gently, lightly and slowly to a count of 4, expanding our bellies as we do so. We're going to hold that breath for a count of 2, and then slowly exhale through our mouths for a count of 6. And when you exhale, you should feel your belly contracting or pulling back in. So let's practice that a couple of times. So inhale gently, hold, and exhale. Let's try it again. Inhale gently, hold, and exhale. Now, we don't have time to practice for 5 minutes today, but we just want to encourage you to try that. The important thing to remember is to make sure that your exhale is longer than your inhale. And doing that several times throughout the day, or as many times as you can be really helpful. So again, when we talk about that coping phase, the way we choose to cope, whether maladaptive or adaptive, can really help determine whether or not that stress reaction cycle lessens or gets worse. So the way our brains work is that if we respond more adaptively more often, then that becomes like more of a natural or automatic default response. Again, if we tend to respond maladaptively more often, then pretty much the same thing happens. So I want you guys to take another moment and just read this conversation between a parent and teenager. And I want you to just think about, if that's something that you feel like you can relate to. Or if not this particular conversation, a similar one, or maybe even times when we attempt to have conversations with our teenagers and then we get maybe a 1 or 2 word response, right? I think as parents, specifically as parents of teens, we can all on some level relate to that. And so I want us to just kind of think about, when we have these conversations with our teens, first of all, how do we feel when that happens, right? How do we react or how do we respond? Do we sometimes respond in a certain way and then regret it? Or do we sometimes criticize ourselves based on how we responded or maybe how we didn't respond, right? So Dr. Kristen Neff is a leading pioneer in an area of research called self-compassion. And the way she describes self-compassion is as follows. So she says, instead of mercilessly judging and criticizing yourself for various inadequacies and shortcomings, self-compassion means you are kind and understanding when confronted with personal failings. So this idea of self-compassion We want to be clear that it's not self-pity, it's not self-indulgence, it's not, even though it's similar, it's not the same as self-esteem. So it's not about like letting ourselves off the hook or just not taking responsibility for our actions. It's more about thinking, if I see someone who's struggling in some way, it's about involving acting the same way towards that person that you see struggling, acting that same way towards yourself when you're having a difficult time, or when you've failed, or when you've noticed something that you're not happy with or that you don't like about yourself. So I'm going to hand it over to Hawa. She's going to talk a little bit about self-care.
All right, so Natalie just explained a little bit about self-compassion. And so now, as she said, we are going to talk a little bit about self-care. So in self-care, essentially what we're trying to do is we're actively working towards increasing those positive experiences, right? Or at least that's what the aim is. And so the problem kind of comes about when self-care, particularly from a personal angle, I'm sure as parents, we've, kind of been conditioned to make sacrifices for our kids and make sacrifice. And so that self-care slowly tends to kind of, we tend to look at it as being selfish. And so we want to kind of take self-care and relate it to self-compassion in a progressive way, and that's exactly, I think, what as Dr. Neef is doing there. So basically, just reframing that self-care as self-compassion, where self-compassion becomes kind of the state, and then self-care is those actions that we take or that we engage in. Okay, and so giving yourself some grace is, I think, a little bit about what Natalie said. It's not about pity or letting yourself off the hook. It's just giving yourself some grace. And those are words of wisdom, I think, from Natalie there. So I'm gonna give her credit for that. But, essentially, we're not going to get it perfect. We're not going to get it all done. But again, just giving yourself some grace, taking the time to giving yourself that time to take care of yourself is very much not just well-deserved, but just very, very important. We always remember to, charge our cell phone batteries, and so that, and very much so we need to do the same for ourselves so that we are functioning properly and optimally and don't overheat and burn out. It's very important. Another example that I related to is, seems like forever ago, where when we used to fly on planes and, they tell you put your oxygen mask on first before you put on anybody else's. This is kind of that same concept. You have to be able to take the time to take care of yourself so that you can help those and be of service to your children, your family, and then all the other responsibilities that are dependent upon you. Okay. So now that I've said all of that, I want to take a little bit of time to make a distinction between self-indulgence versus self-care. So an example that I like, and I always have to remember for myself, is, treating yourself to maybe your favorite candy bar is a form of self-care. Maybe, having the entire bag, that might be a little more indulgent. Okay, so that's a good example that I think kind of sticks well in everybody's mind. So just remembering that the purpose of self-care is really to increase positive experiences, to have a healthier self, and certainly not to create a whole host of other problems for ourselves, like consuming an entire bag of candy might do. So just to keep those things in mind, everything in moderation. So, and then on to the next slide. No, we're going to stay on this slide. I'm sorry. So here we've got some several methods of self-care. The first one here is self-care, having a self-care kit. So self-care kit can include things like a stress ball, maybe some healthy snacks, a favorite calming, happy pictures or lotions, things of that nature, maybe even having a little fidget, something just to kind of, be just a little distracting for a little bit for yourself. Connecting with friends or coworkers, maybe engaging in a hobby that interests you or makes you feel good. Spending time outside in nature, just taking in some fresh air, enjoying the beauties of nature. Being active is also a good tip, just expending some of that unhealthy energy that's causing us to be anxious or frustrated is helpful. It also gets those dopamines and endorphins pumping, right? Which are our feel good chemicals there. So the only thing we would like to caution with being active is, just stay within your limits. Don't overexert yourself. Again, that concept of moderation comes to mind. And then journaling. Journaling can be done, through writing, but it can also be done through art if writing is not, something that you enjoy or not your thing. Certainly you can have a drawing journal where you just draw, or having a gratitude journal is another good method. Okay. And then the last one there, mindful meditation, is what I'm going to focus on for the next few slides. Okay, so here there are two definitions here about meditation and mindfulness, and I wanted to include them for the presentation slides, but essentially the difference is that meditation is the practice, whereas where one can develop mindfulness. So really we want to think about meditation as the practice, whereas mindfulness is the state. Okay. So meditation dates back as far back as 3,000 years. And what it is, it's that it involves working with the mind, and it's essentially a training in awareness. So in meditation, we're working with the mind to gain an improved sense of presence and calm and attentiveness. And I'm sure in parenting, I'm sure many of you face uncertainties, doubts, and many other things that may, maybe make you feel less capable or not in control. I'm hoping y'all can relate. And then, many aspects of our lives, particularly recently, appear out of our control. While we cannot control many of the situations and circumstances that we find ourselves in, we do have control over our actions and how we choose to respond. So, and able to have that control over our reactions and responses, it helps to foster our awareness and our ability to maintain focus. Okay, so and this is essentially what meditation is meant for, to foster our awareness. So typically we're conditioned to focus on the external world. Meditation is meant to really allow the mind to become more relaxed. So meditation is practiced by dedicating a certain amount of time and effort to being mindful, or as mindful as you can be. Again, it's a practice and it takes time. So, and in order to do this, practicing meditation, generally we choose a meditation object. Now that could be the breath, it can be an image, it could be an object, anything that will help us to focus our attention, okay? So before we go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about more about meditation, just wanted to, make a note, formal mindfulness practice of meditation, maybe you don't want to engage in that, it might sound too complicated or too formal. It just wanted to highlight that there are other ways to be mindful and have mindful practices in your everyday lives, like mindful eating, mindful walking, even mindful conversation. Really, it's just about allowing yourself to be present and aware, engaging in the activities, and just paying attention to those, suspending judgment, just being fully engaged in whatever experience is happening to you in that present moment. Okay, and typically we want to choose a calming activity. And then the next slide. Thanks. So on this slide, there's listed some scientific or some science-based benefits of meditation. The most common reason people often seek meditation is typically the first one that's listed, which is to reduce stress, right? So we know that stress disrupts our sleep. It can help it can lead to depression and anxiety, increases our blood pressure, also contributes to not only us feeling fatigued, but having that cloudy thinking, right? Impairing our judgments from time to time. So these are all things that meditation has been found to be helpful in combating. Okay. And go to the next slide, please. Okay. So here, meditation, aka self-directed neuroplasticity. So what in the world is self-directed neuroplasticity, right? So when someone meditates, they're directing change in the brain by inwardly and consciously directing attention to those particular pathways. Okay, so that's essentially what it is. We're just working and focusing. And so exercising those networks of the brain, thereby strengthening those neural networks, right? So essentially that's all that is. And so meditation, how it helps is, and studies have shown just 20 minutes a day has found that it increases your rational thinking, decision making, right, in your prefrontal cortex, the amygdala that Natalie spoke about earlier with stress. This helps to decrease those emotional or fear center of the brain, so it decreases some of that activity there. It also enhances learning and memory. Again, studies have found just a few short weeks that has increased the size of brain in this region here. And it also improves brain cell activity, as well as heightened awareness and bliss. Okay. So we've included some science there, just to have some knowledge, right? The other reason we've included it is because, when we're aware of what processes happen, it acts as a good reinforcer for us, right? We all know on a superficial level that stress is bad. I don't think anyone starts their day off, in the morning, I'm going to have a very stressful day today, or I'm going to make some very unhealthy choices. I don't think any one of us really start our day off like that. At least I hope not, but, and so we've included this information here just so that, when we are aware of what physiological implications of stress has on our bodies, and then conversely, the benefits of self-care methods such as meditation, we're motivated to take action. We're motivated, who doesn't want to increase their brain cell activity, right? Who doesn't want to increase their learning and memory, particularly as we age, right? We've got to stay 2 steps ahead of those teenage children that we've got running around. So, so we need to take care of ourselves to do that, okay? And then on this last slide here for my piece, before we practice, I want to point out just a few things about meditation, okay? First, it takes practice, okay? And so, our minds have a tendency to wander off to bills. Where are our children? What are they, what are they doing? What is their academic status? So all mind just wanders, and so the point is just to kind of refocus and bring your attention and your thoughts back to just whatever object you're trying to focus on. And again, with practice, it gets a little bit easier and a little bit better, so don't be too hard on yourself. The whole point is just to take part in it. Again, just helping us guide us to being increasingly present and connected, okay? There is no, you know, the bar is set by your own personal standards, so, it's, um, there's no wrong way to do it really, as long as you're taking the time out, is the most important thing, and just focusing and giving your mind, your body that little bit of a break and rest. Okay, is what the aim is. And so typically meditation is done sitting up, but we can do it while standing, while walking, even lying down. Although if you're going to do it while walking, just be mindful of your surroundings. Don't want to, bump into anything or injure yourself. So just be mindful of that. And then lastly, your eyes can be open or closed. Generally in the beginning, closing your eyes is more helpful. And so I think we will go ahead and do a little meditation practice real quick.
Mindful breathing. Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion. Make sure that your back is straight and that you're comfortable. Take a few deep breaths. While you're breathing deeply, relax your shoulders, your stomach muscles, the muscles in your face, your hands, and your legs. Let go of all the tightness in your body. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Notice what it feels like as it enters through your nose, goes down through your throat, filling your lungs, and back out through your nose. Notice your stomach and chest rise and fall each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. And just allow your breathing to be natural and relaxed. Now bring your attention to the feeling of your breath in your nose. Feel your breath as it comes in and goes out. Just focus on this sensation, paying attention to each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. As you inhale, maybe your breath feels cool. And as you exhale, maybe it feels a little warmer. When your mind wanders, or if you become distracted, just notice what's going on in your head, and then gently bring your attention back to your breath, going in and out. Focus on the feeling of your breath and allow thoughts and feelings to come and go in the background. Now gently bring your attention back to the touch of your body on your seat and open your eyes.
Thank you, Hawa, for leading us in that meditation. Hopefully we didn't put you guys to sleep. Hopefully you're still with us. So just as Natalie and Hawa were mentioning that you've got to be intentional about taking time out for yourself because, it's natural as parents to put all of the needs for your kids first. It's what we do. But if you don't take just a few minutes each day, especially in these times, with COVID, and you guys are thinking about college and planning for those things, if we don't take just a few minutes of time each day, to set aside for yourself, then you might start to experience that stress reaction cycle, and it continues and it kind of grows and gets bigger, and then we kind of start to feel burnout. So the next few minutes, I just want to talk to you guys about scheduling time and making an appointment for yourself, just so that you can recharge, kind of like a battery. And we know that this is going to look different for everyone. Um, some people, depending on your work schedules and how things look like for you right now, you might have time to kind of set aside at the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening. Others of you may have just a few minutes through all your Zoom meetings and Zoom calls and things that you guys are doing, um, a minute here and there. So just kind of think about what your day looks like and what your routine looks like, and start to think about where there might be a few minutes here or there that you can kind of take to do some of these practical strategies. Um, and again, make your plan work for you. Try something. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't boost your mood, if it doesn't make you feel better, then the next time just try something different and try something new. Sorry, you guys. There we go. Um, as you are thinking about taking that time, there's some things that we want you guys to just think through and consider. And the first is definitely thinking through any barriers that may prevent you from taking that initial step of that self-compassion and that self-care. Do you need childcare? Do you need space? Do you need time? Do you need money? What are the things that you need to help you actually take that first step? And if you're anything like me, I'm a planner and I like to write things down. If I don't write it down, it's not going to get done, and I kind of forget about it. So just try to start think through those barriers and write them down and think through how you can work through them. And then the next thing that you want to think about and consider are what things trigger stress, what things trigger that stress reaction. I know for me, it's really feeling out of control. And so for the last year and how many ever months now, I've kind of been in that stress reaction cycle. And I know, like, here I am talking to you guys, I know what things I need to do. Sometimes I'm not always actually good about doing them. So recently I've tried a couple of things to try to manage the stress reaction, but just thinking about what things um, kind of trigger that reaction. And then if you are aware of what things trigger stress, you can be mindful and kind of watch out for them and know, okay, this situation is going to be stressful for me. Maybe I need to plan afterwards and plan just for some time for myself. And then you want to think about whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert. If you're an introvert, then you might need time away from other people. If you're an extrovert, then you might need to be around people to kind of rejuvenate and recharge. And obviously, do what you feel comfortable with in light of COVID. And then you also want to think about if you're a night owl or an early bird. Because if you're a night owl, you're not going to want to get up early and set aside that time. You might have to do that in the evening. And if you're an early bird, you're not going to wait to midnight or later on in the evening to do that time. So you want to do it when it's best for you. And then you want to think about when you kind of start to lose steam during the day. When does that stress really start to set in? For me, it's really kind of after that lunch period, or at about 2 to 3 o'clock, when I kind of start to lose steam. And so I try to be really productive before that 2 to 3 o'clock time, because I know I'm going to really start to feel the pressure between 2 and 3. And then you just want to think about what things you enjoy and what things do you dread. You want to build into to a plan the things that you really like doing. And then if there are things that you dread that you know that you can anticipate, you can work around that, and again set aside some time for yourself to use some of these strategies. And then you also just want to think about whether or not you are able to kind of bounce back really quickly from a stressful situation, or do you need a little bit more time to kind of pull yourself together and regain your composure. I know for me, it kind of takes me a little while to bounce back, and so I know I'm going to need more than just 5 minutes. I might need 10, 15, or 20 minutes to kind of just sit and think through things and take some of that time for myself. Um, and so in addition to the meditation and to the breathing, we have some clickable links here for you guys to look through, at a later time if you would like. These are just some strategies that you can use. And number one here, when we talk about actually making an appointment for yourself, this is a step-by-step plan generator, if you will. It's from University of Buffalo in New York, and they walk you through each step, all the things that you should consider. And it gives you step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Here's how you actually create a self-care plan for yourself. And number 2 is self-care wheel. And so there are actually 6 areas of self-care. So, if you think, what, I really need to do better with that work-life balance. There's self-care for the professional field, there's self-care for spiritual and personal and emotional. So if you think that maybe you need to look at that work-life balance, this wheel here, again, it's a clickable link. It gives you some ideas and some strategies too, specifically that relate to that kind of work-life balance or spiritual or any other the areas you think that you might need self-care for. And then following Hala's meditation, we have a link here to a Serenity app, and they have it's on Apple and on Android. So no matter what phone you have, you can actually download this app, and then they have guided meditation. I believe it's 5 minutes for each one that they walk you through the meditation. We mentioned journaling earlier. This link here walks you through kind of like a personal experience of journaling and different kinds of journaling, like gratitude journaling or stream of consciousness journaling, where, if you're kind of on that train and your thoughts are on that runaway train and you can't stop them, you can take out a piece of paper, or sometimes I use an application, the notes application on my phone, and I literally just sit there and I type the things that are running through my mind. And once I do that, I'm able to release them and they don't take control. So there's different links there, or there's one link for different types of journaling that you might find useful, that are good strategies. The 5th one is reframing, kind of along with the running thoughts. It kind of walks you through how to think about situations differently and how to think through them differently. The coronavirus anxiety workbook, if you are experiencing anxiety related, to coronavirus, this workbook is really great. Again, practical steps and strategies you can take. Also applicable for young students and for kids as well. And we also have a link here to self-compassion. Again, Hawa mentioned that self-compassion is kind of like the mindset, whereas self-care are the specific strategies and the steps. So this goes into a little bit more detail about self-compassion as a mindset. And then number 8 is just a video that helps you kind of think through some of those thoughts that we have that just pop into our brain that are automatic. and it helps us kind of identify them and label them. And again, we can use those reframing strategies to think through things differently and show ourselves a little bit of self-compassion. This is just a little quote we found we thought was funny. You guys can take just a minute to read that. I don't have a teenager. I know how I told you guys that I have a little toddler at home. I feel like the last 2 years I have aged quite a bit, so I can relate a little bit to this quote. I don't know if I've aged 20 years. Maybe it looks like I've aged 20 years, but I feel like I have aged a little bit. Okay, just we wanted to leave you guys with a few minutes of having an opportunity to ask questions if you would like. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to just unmute and ask them. You can put them in the chat. We have a comment about being an introvert and it's difficult living in an extroverted world. I can relate. I am definitely an introvert, and when I get into that stress reaction cycle and I know that I'm stressed, I know that I've got to take time away from everyone and time just to be by myself to recharge. I definitely can relate to that.
All right. And you can, again, unmute yourself, or you can put your question in the chat box. We'll be sure to get to it.
Or any comments?
I have a sort of personal question that I would like to ask. We're so involved in social media these days, and I sometimes find myself just strolling uncontrollably or, mindlessly just scrolling for hours sometimes. And if you have an iPhone, at the end of the week, you receive a screen report. And this past week, my screen report, it shocked me the number of hours that I had spent on my phone on average this week. So do you have any suggestions or, thoughts about social media and how we can use that more mindfully instead of mindlessly?
Natalie or Hawa, do you have any thoughts? I think I would you're already aware of that now. I think that's like the first step of becoming aware of the fact that you're just scrolling. You're not even really paying attention to what you're looking at. I know I've gotten in the habit of watching videos when I don't actually click on them. I don't know if you guys know what I mean. Like, I don't actually click on the video and listen to the sound. I read the caption. Facebook, it populates a caption. And so I've been noticing that recently, and I have added the screen report to my phone as well recently, and have been shocked by the amount of usage of screen time. So I think that's the first step of just being aware, and then two, being intentional about not jumping right out of bed and grabbing your phone like, oh, let me check Facebook, let me check Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever social media you use. And at the end of the day too, being intentional about just kind of leaving the phone in a separate place. So it's not just an automatic thing, oh, I'm just going to scroll and check and see what's going on with Facebook.
Yeah,
or any social media.
Yeah, I agree. I think kind of, making intentional effort to, at a certain point, it kind of like goes back to when we were talking about making the appointment for self-care, right? I think we can also schedule in that social media time, and say, okay, well, I'm going to check my phone during this time. And it's hard. And if it takes kind of like Meredith said, putting it in another room or putting it in a place where it's not as accessible, but kind of just saying, you know, I'm only going to look, because that makes it intentional, right? Like I'm only going to look at this time, or I'm only going to look, during this time frame. I think can be helpful, but it is hard, because sometimes just that, that especially if we've had a rough day and if we are feeling stressed, sometimes kind of like that, just that mindlessness can be calming in a way, right? Like, because it can kind of take your mind away from all the things you might be ruminating on or stressing about, right? But again, I think with everything, just like planning self-care, kind of that has to be intentional planning as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. I mean, definitely agree with being intentional. I love that the awareness is there and that report is there. I'd be a little scared to see my own, but I think another good strategy would be like a behavior replacement, or an alternate, something else to turn to. Something I've done, because I've had that same social media in the evenings where I'm just scrolling mindlessly. And something that I found to be helpful is I love those word search games. And so, what I've done is I've taken the word search app on my phone and put it next to my social media apps on my phone, so that it's right there to remind me that, do you really want to take this choice, or do you, it's kind of that fork in the road. And, again, we don't always say we're going to make, unhealthy choices. And sometimes we do, and that's okay, but just having those alternate options, giving those alternate options for ourselves as well.
Awesome. Great. And we did get a student comment, so we'll just read that from Kaden and her mom. And she says, social media is a blessing and a curse. I agree. I'm aware of the news and other social, political topics going on in the world, but it does take you down a rabbit hole and can be hard to disconnect. I agree. I completely agree with that. I probably need to actually watch the news, but I'd say that I use Twitter and, those kinds of things for my news. And it probably will just be better to actually watch the news or read the news than use social media as the news. So thanks for that comment, Kaden. That was great.
And it's hard, especially, being a teenager these days. That's probably your biggest mode of communication with your friends, and even likely maybe sometimes parents. You guys are sitting in different rooms. I know I'm guilty of this. With my husband, I will text him knowing he's in the other room, like, "Hey, can you do this or do that?" Instead of just talking to him, even though he's in the next room. So it's been kind of, we've relied on it for our communication. So I know it's hard to break that cycle, but just taking that time away can be good, and especially in this climate. Because I know I hop on there and I see people I care about, deeply, and they're arguing with each other, and I'm like, I can't handle it. I gotta just close it. So just taking that time away and knowing that you need that time away is really good. And don't be afraid to delete the apps and come back later. I had to do that recently. I deleted all my social media apps, and after a while, I was like, okay, I think things are better now. I can get back on. So just don't shy away from taking that time away from social media. So that's a really great observation.
So I just noticed Olivia made a comment about not having time to go on social media because she's always at track and things, and track is a way to move your body. And this is not really something that we touched on very much today, but Olivia, you're absolutely right. Exercise and moving our bodies is such another great way of practicing self-care and stress management. When we exercise, those endorphins are released, and it can be amazing in regards to managing stress. So thank you for making that comment. And exercise can look differently. Again, it might be running track, it might be exercising with exercise equipment, it might be dancing, there's so many different ways to exercise and move our bodies, but it's definitely an important stress management technique.
Great. Well, that looks like that was our last comment. It doesn't like we have any other questions. So we will go ahead and wrap up today's session. But I do want to thank you all so much for presenting this information and having this space for our parents to be able to get the information that they need for themselves and also to help their students. We did record this session, and I'm going to go ahead and stop that recording, and we're going to post that online, and we'll send it to you in an email as well so that you can go back and watch it. But again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free. I'll hang out for just a little bit longer after we end the session if you do have any last minute questions that you want to ask. But again, I thank you for your time, and I hope that you have a great day. Thank you again for joining us for this Lunch and Learn.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, and you are free to log off if you would like to. Again, if you have any questions, and again, to all of my awesome staff at the School Psychological Services Office, thank you. That presentation was amazing. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for having us.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Elise. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
All right, I'm going to end it. Bye, Mrs. Farrington. Have a great one.